Afternoon, students. So this afternoon we are going to discuss the poems. I don't know how you will pronounce that properly, so a lot of English majors are probably screaming right now. Poems, written by Dr. Jose Portasio Mercado Rizal Alonso y Rialonda, also known as Dr. Sarizal. So for the last few videos, we discussed on the childhood of Dr. Sarizal and the works that he produced early on. So this is something that I would like to reiterate in this class. It's very important for us to know that the writings of Rizal actually reflect most of his life. So Rizal's works, like the Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, perfectly depict the cancers of the society faced by Rizal during his time, or the cancers of the society faced by the majority of the Filipinos living during Rizal's time. So it cannot be taken from that fact alone that Rizal has a tendency to make sure that everything that he has written, whether it be short stories, poems, or zarzuelas, would reflect the contemporary values or the things that he believes of which are moralistic and true to be written in paper. So this gives truism to the line that Dr. Sarizal famously quoted, "The pen is mightier than the sword." Okay, so this literary adventure or literary instinct of Dr. Sarizal, I'm saying instinct because it seems like it's second nature to him, stems not from his childhood, and we see that as we read the poems like Ang Mga Kabata, Sa Aking Mga Kabata, but it was later on developed when he began to study in Ateneo. So, in Ateneo actually was different from from today's Ateneo. So Ateneo now is known as one of the best schools in the Philippines, and it is inclusive. Inclusive because yes, only the rich can afford the tuition fees in Ateneo, but it is open for all, whether you be a man or a woman, or whatever your gender preference is. Okay? But before, Ateneo was a boys' school. So it was a college under the supervision of the Spanish Jesuits, and it was formerly known as Escuela Pia, or a charity school, formerly named of Ateneo, a school for poor boys in Manila, which was established in the city government on 1817. So from Escuela Pia, we have Ateneo Municipal, and finally we have Ateneo de Manila. So on June 10, 1872, this is the story of how Rizal got to Ateneo. Rizal was accompanied by Pasiano and the college registrar at the time, Father Magin Ferrando. Father Magin Ferrando refused to admit Rizal on the account that Rizal seemed to be a sick boy. Okay, so first things first, he was very sick, and of course Rizal was late for his registration. But a certain Manuel Ceres Borjos, a nephew of Father Burgos, intervened for Dr. Sarizal. And to cut the long story short, Rizal was an Atenean. Okay, so the first year of Ateneo, Rizal had a teacher named Father Jose Beck, whom he described as somebody who was quite thin and tall. And of course, Rizal was known to be the brightest pupil in the whole class. And to improve his Spanish lessons, and you would wonder, why would Rizal study Spanish? During Rizal's time, Spanish was known as the classical language, just like English during this time. So it's very important if you want to show that, if you want to study, just like if you want to study law or you want to study in ABC for your undergraduate studies, you want to study medicine, you need to be well versed in English because most of our academic writings are written in English. During Jose Rizal's time, the medium for academic writing was Spanish. So Spanish is a dominant language. Now, for those of you here who have claimed that their grandparents are Spaniards, then Spanish, then if your grandparents do know how to speak Spanish, it means that your ancestors are probably a part of the Principalia or part of the moneyed group of people back in the day. Because although Spanish is the medium for academic writings, it was not inclusive for everyone. It was exclusive for a group of people who can afford Spanish lessons and who actually need Spanish in their day-to-day lives. So students would usually enroll themselves in Spanish classes, but in order to keep up with the academic writings in Ateneo, because after all, it is a college, Jose Rizal had to take Spanish lessons in a nearby campus, which was in Santa Isabel College, and he paid 3 pesos for every session. Okay? So, at the end of the school year in March 1873, Rizal returned to Calamba. And when the summer vacation ended, Rizal returned to Manila for his second year term in Ateneo, and this time he was already in a boarding house inside Intramuros. So during his second year in Ateneo, we get to learn about the books that Rizal preferred. So Rizal liked The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. This is a very good book. I read this when I was still in high school. So it follows the story of a revenge plot of a certain person who was stripped away, who was stripped with all his wealth, okay, all his earthly possessions, and probably part of that was the love of his life, was taken from him, and now he is seeking revenge. So it's a good story because even though revenge is a premise, there's always the redemptive arc. And I think it's very entertaining. It's also a foreshadowing that Rizal would actually be like the Count of Monte Cristo. But at the same time, the books actually show that there's already an exchange of ideas, literature, and education from abroad into the Philippines. So we are no longer trapped in a colonial ideas or colonial mindsets given to us by the Spaniards, but we're actually open to other ideas from other Westerners who probably don't like the system or who do not like the colonial system. Because let's face it, even if the government was pro-Spaniards, its neighbors in Europe didn't really like the idea that Spain was taking all of the territories in Asia. So there were definitely anti-Spanish government ideas circulating around the world. Okay? Then we have the Universal History by Cesar Cantu. So Rizal actually persuaded his father to buy him the set of historical work that was a great aid to his studies. And finally, we also have the book by Dr. Fyodor Jagor, a German scientist, traveler, who visited the Philippines and wrote the Travels in the Philippines. And finally, we have our third year in Ateneo. So Rizal's grades remained excellent in all subjects, but he only had one medal, which was in Latin. And of course, his fourth year in Ateneo, Rizal became an interno, and he topped all of his classmates in all subjects and won 5 medals at the end of the school term. For Rizal's last year in Ateneo, he was known as the most brilliant of his time, and he was even called the pride of the Jesuits. He graduated on March 23, 1877, and on the commencement day, Rizal was 16 years old and received from his alma mater the degree of Bachelor of Arts with highest honors. So Rizal also joined a Marian congregation, which was a religious society where Rizal became the secretary. And he cultivated his literary talent under the guidance of Father Sanchez. And Father Jose Villarica advised Rizal to stop communing with the muse and pay more attention to more practical studies. So what does this mean? For those of you who like painting, who like drawing, who like writing poems or singing or dancing, it simply means you have to stop doing that and focus on your studies. So that's what it means when the person tells you to stop communicating with the muse. Because sometimes these activities can be seen as less academic, less rigorous, and less applicable to our real life. I mean, yes, you have a very good voice and all, but only a few people can actually make a good career out of singing. And it's not to destroy your dreams, but probably people who are telling you to stop communing with your muse is to tell you that you need to focus on the things that will give you a better edge in life. So that's an advice given by his teacher. However, Rizal is a man of many talents. So he has so many muses. By the way, when you say muse, it's not the person whom you elect in school and to call him or to call her as the most beautiful. Di ba mo man lang nasa atong homeroom? The representative of the class, the resident class beauty. But the muse is actually a Greek deity. There are several muses. So these were the inspirations. So whenever a person is talented in the Greek society, they were thought to be visited and favored by the muses. Okay, so Rizal was told to stop writing. That's the bottom line. And then Rizal studied painting under the famous Spanish painter Agustin Saez and sculpture under Romualdo de Jesus and noted Filipino sculptor. Okay, so the poems that he written in Ateneo include something for his mom, who first recognized Rizal's talent in writing. So, mi primera inspiración, my first inspiration was written in 1874. It is the first poem by Rizal, and he wrote this during his days in Ateneo, which was dedicated to his mother on her birthday. Rizal wrote it before he was 14 years old. In 1875, inspired by Father Sanchez, Rizal wrote more poems such as Felicitación or Felicitation, El Embarque Himno de Flota de Magallanes, the departure hymn to Magellan's fleet, Y es Español Elcano, el primero en dar la vuelta al mundo, and he in Spanish, Elcano, the first to circumnavigate the world. El combate Orbistondo, the terror de Jolo, the battle Orbistondo, the terror of Jolo. In 1876, Rizal wrote poems on various topics which include religion, education, childhood, memories, and war, and they were as follows. On Recuerdo a mi pueblo, in memory of my town. Okay, that was a good intermission number. Also, Alianza Íntima entre la religión y la buena educación, which is an intimate alliance between religion and good education. So, Rizal actually enforced the teaching or belief that religion was beneficial in education. Por la educación recibe lustre en patria. Through education, the country receives light. Rizal believed in the significant role which education plays in the progress of the welfare of a nation. El cautiverio y el triunfo, Batalla de Lucenio y prisión de Boabdil, the captivity and triumph, the Battle of Lucena, and the imprisonment of Boabdil. This martial poem describes the defeat and capture of Boabdil, the last Moorish Sultan of Granada. La entrada triunfal de los Reyes Catolicis en Granada, the triumphal entry of the Catholic monarchs into Granada. So a year later, Rizal wrote more, and among them were El Heroísmo de Colón, the heroism of Columbus, which praises Columbus for discovering America. Colón y Juan, Columbus and John II. This poem relates how King John of Portugal missed fame and riches by his failure to finance the projected expedition of Columbus into the New World. Gran Consejo de la Mayor Desdicha, the great solace in great misfortune. This is a legend in verse of the tragic life of Columbus. Un diálogo al aviso a despedida de los colegiales, so a farewell dialogue to the students. So this was the last poem written by Rizal in Ateneo, and it is a farewell to a classmate. So if you will miss your classmates, especially for the nursing, because you will be graduating in 2 years, and then yun, mag-graduation mo pohon, so this is actually very good. Also, it was rumored that Rizal wrote Al Niño Jesus for a while. Okay, we're back. So he wrote Al Niño Jesus to the child Jesus, and La Virgen Maria to the Virgin Mary, and San Eustacio Martir. Okay, so these were the poems written by Dr. Rizal. So we are going to read some of them, And we are going to butcher the Spanish language because your teacher doesn't really know how to speak Spanish, but as part of an encouragement for you to read your works and your assignments. Sometimes students, every time I ask them to submit poems, poems, they try to skip the process, just research without really reading. So, for you people who just handed in, I'm reading the work of Miss Erica B. Juson, who is a second-year nursing student. So, late siya ni Pasa. So, iyang work ako ang basahon. Okay? So, let's read this. My first inspiration. Mi primera inspiración. Written in 1874. Why falls so rich a spray of fragrance from the bowers of the balmy flowers upon this festive day? Why from woods and vales do we hear sweet measures ringing that seem to be singing of a choir of nightingales? Why in the grass below do birds start at the wind's noises, unleashing their honeyed voices as they hop from bough to bough? Why should the spring that glows its crystalline murmur be tuning to the zephyr's mellow crooning as among the flowers it flows? Why seems to me more enduring, more fair than other days, the dawn's enchanting face among the red clouds appearing? The reason, dear mother, is they feast your day of bloom, the rose with its perfume, the birds with its harmonies, and the spring that rings with laughter upon this joyful day, with its murmur seems to say, live happily ever after. And from the spring in the grove, now turn to hear the first note, and from my lute I emote to the impulse of my love. Okay, so it's something written for his mother. Let's try the Spanish version. Porque exhalan a porfia de cáliz dulces olores las embalsamadas flores en esto festivo día, y porque en la selva amena se oye dulce melodía que asemeja la armonía de la arpada Filomena, porque en la molida grama las aves al son del viento exhalan meloso acento y saltan de rama en rama, y la fuente cristalina formando dulce murmullo del cefiro al suave arrullo entre las flores camina. Es que hoy, celebrando día, oh mi madre cariñosa, con su perfume la rosa, y el ave con su armonía, y la fuente rumorosa, en este día feliz, con su murmullo te dice, que vivas siempre gozosa, y de esa fuente el rumor, oí la primera nota, que ahora de mi laúd brota, al impulso de mi amor. Okay? Then we have Congratulations, which was written in 1875. If Philomela with harmonious tongue to blond Apollo who manifests his face, behind hill or over changing mountain, canticles sent. So we as well, full of sweet contentment, salute you and your very noble saint, with tender music and fraternal measures, dear Antonio, from all your sisters and your other kin, receiving most lovingly the loving accent that suave warmth of love dictates to them, placid and tender, from amorous wife and amiable Emilio, sweetly receives an unsurpassed affection, and may its sweetness in disaster soften the ruder torments, as the sea pilot who so bravely fought tempestuous waters in the dark of night, gazes upon his darling vessel safe and come to port. So setting aside all worldly predilections, now let your eyes be lifted heavenward to him who is the solace of all men and loving Father, and from ourselves that in such loving accents salute you in everywhere you celebrate this clamorous vivas that from the heart resound, be pleased to accept. There's the Spanish version. Felicitaciones. Si Filomena con arpada lengua, al rubio Apolo que sofá asoma, tras alta loma o encombrado monte, trinos envía. También nosotras de contento llenas, te saluda.